As you've probably already seen, the Budget Reconciliation Bill, also known as the One Big Beautiful Bill, was signed into law last week by President Trump. The federal affairs team here at GOA, myself included, fought hard with many sleepless nights and trips to offices all over Capitol Hill, lobbying for gun owners. In fact, one news outlet reported that GOA was the organization that pioneered the strategy to repeal suppressors and short-barreled firearms from the NFA. And another reported that GOA was practically parked in the US Senate. That's why today, I wanted to give you guys a behind-the-scenes look at what our team was doing during the final days of budget reconciliation. Hi, I'm Ben Sanderson, and you're watching the Minuteman Moment. Before I pull back the curtain, I wanted to take a second to let you know about Goals. The Gun Owners Advocacy and Leadership Summit is set to be held August 9th and 10th of this year in Knoxville, Tennessee. Come out and visit with some of your favorite manufacturers, participate in activism training, and hear from the top voices in the Second Amendment community. The best part? It's free for GOA members. So sign up today using the link in the description below. Okay, now back to the video. As I mentioned earlier, the One Big Beautiful Bill was signed into law this 4th of July. The bill included a zeroing out of the $200 tax stamps for suppressors, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and any other weapons. While we didn't get everything we were pushing for, this represents a major step forward in the fight against the National Firearms Act. This is a battle that GOA spearheaded last year, and for the first time in almost a century, there was a serious push to roll back the NFA's unconstitutional restrictions. AmmoLand recently praised GOA for being the tip of the spear in the battle to defang the NFA. Gun Owners America, GOA, is spearheading efforts to eliminate the burdensome taxes imposed on suppressors, short-barreled rifles, SBRs, short-barreled shotguns, SBSs, and any other weapons, AOWs. But if you've been paying attention to our Twitter for the past few weeks, you know the final version wasn't everything we wanted. While the Budget Reconciliation Bill does take a huge chunk out of the NFA, it doesn't stop the registration scheme the NFA is built on. We know that for our members, taxation was only a part of the issue of the NFA. The unconstitutional registration must be dismantled. That's why we've stepped up to do what Congress wouldn't. We filed our One Big Beautiful lawsuit hours after Trump signed his bill. The registration component to the National Firearms Act only exists to register those who've paid the tax. So, when there's no tax to pay, who needs a registry and tyrannical registration paperwork? Anyway, we'll get into the videos of our lawsuit in another video. For now, let's talk about what happened. For the past year, the federal team at GOA was hard at work pushing pro-Second Amendment provisions into the Budget Reconciliation Bill. After months of planning with congressional offices and experts on the reconciliation process, we decided to use this tax-only bill as a way to abolish the largest tax on guns, the National Firearms Act. We had buy-in from our allies in the House and Senate. Strong fighters like Representative Andrew Clyde, Ben Cline, and Chip Roy, along with Senators Roger Marshall, Steve Daines, and Mike Crapo. We also managed to convince the members and staff of key committees like the House Ways and Means, along with Senate Finance Committee, to back our play as well. This took months and months of phone calls, emails, and in-person meetings to explain everything from what a short-barreled rifle was to how our strategy of removing the NFA excise tax and registration was even possible. Now normally, this job can be a lot of putting out small fires, whether it's helping some staff better understand a bill or gun technicality, or fighting anti-gun bills and prepping information to better educate pro-gun congressional members. But this process was different. On top of doing all of our normal lobbying work in the background, it took a lot of continuous effort over months to research, debate, and decide the best course going forward. We also had to put out fires too during the process, like when Representative David Kustoff blocked the original inclusion of our language and only wanted to zero out transfer fees for suppressors. But thanks to GOA members and supporters, we quashed Kustoff's attempt to wimp out on the fight before it even started. You guys made your voices heard loud and clear. Every single one of you who called and emailed had Congress scared, forcing them to pay attention to gun owners. All of the pressure that you created when you called allowed us to exert even more force on the naysayers, and eventually we were able to get our full language into the bill, removing suppressors completely from the taxation and registration of the National Firearms Act. There were many late-night calls and conversations during the first half of this fight, and we were able to say, your constituents are demanding you stand up for the Second Amendment. And thanks to their very full inboxes and voicemails, Congress knew we weren't bluffing. From there, the bill moved on to the Senate, where we knew that our work wasn't finished. We continued to lobby for the removal of short-barreled firearms from the National Firearms Act as well. As many of you know, GOA helped introduce the SHORT Act into Congress with Representative Andrew Clyde and Senator Roger Marshall. Both are true warriors of the Second Amendment. Thanks to our efforts and the efforts of our grassroots memberships calling the Senate, we were able to include short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and AOWs in the Senate version of the Budget Reconciliation Bill. We stood firm against the naysayers. Even though GOA had other alleged pro-gun organizations and members of Congress asking us to stop fighting for the inclusion of short-barreled firearms, we didn't listen, and we didn't compromise. we made sure that short-barreled firearms were added to the Senate version of the bill. The Washington Examiner said that Gun Owners America was the lobbying group that practically parked in the Senate to win support for the changes. But even still, we knew the fight wasn't over. The biggest hurdle was always the unelected, very partisan Senate parliamentarian. Late nights only increased, especially in the last days when the parliamentarian biasly ruled that our language was not bird compliant, striking the language from the bill in its entirety. In fact, this is the first time in US history that an excise tax has been ruled non-compliant via the bird rule. We campaigned for Senate leadership to fire the parliamentarian and got our members involved in the fight, but the calls fell on deaf ears. We've heard from you guys and understand your frustrations. We've seen the comments and your criticisms. And I want to let you guys know we get it. At the end of the day, GOA is an organization full of gun owners, and we want the same thing that you do. Full repeal of the NFA, GCA, Hughes Amendment, abolishment of the ATF, and a full reset to the Second Amendment as our founders intended. As someone who's been personally working on this fight, I wanted to take a few minutes to clear up any misconceptions and answer questions we've gotten. We've been hearing accusations that GOA gave up, cut a deal with our Senate leadership, and sold out our members and accepted some quote-unquote deal. That it was a white flag to leadership, and that's why the parl wasn't fired. The fact is that a majority of Republicans did not want to fire or replace the parliamentarian.
Vice President J.D. Vance should overrule the parliamentarian and let the will of the people, not some staffer hiding behind Senate procedure, determine the future of this country. I wonder, do you agree with that? Do you actually think that Vice President Vance, or maybe even Senator Thune, if he can do that, that they have the authority to overrule the Senate parliamentarian?
I don't know the legalities in it, but I do know that it's a dangerous precedent.
And even now, they still don't want to. It's sad, it sucks, we don't agree with it, but it is what happened despite GOA's fight to pressure Thune to fire her anyways. Frustrations here are valid, but I'm here to tell you that GOA did not accept any backroom deal. We pioneered the strategy for a full repeal of the registration requirements and kept pushing that strategy until the final hours of this bill's final passage. Now, we're using the zero-out tax as a basis for our lawsuit to continue the fight. When the bill went back to the House, time was running out and there was pressure to pass this bill by Independence Day. Still, GOA stayed in the fight and worked with Representative Clyde to amend the bill in the House with a full repeal of suppressors and short-barreled firearms. I'll link our alert in the description below. If we had just achieved one additional GOP vote, we would have forced a vote on the Clyde Amendment, and the final outcome could have been totally different. Again, we here at GOA are angry just like you. The outcome sucks. Gun owners deserve to get far more, but the parliamentarian issued what amounts to an illegal ruling. Then Senate leadership refused to replace her. And then a key House committee failed to allow a vote on the Clyde Amendment. GOA worked hard at each stage to get the full repeal, and in the end, we got close but fell short. I've also been seeing comments claiming that getting nothing would have been better than getting something. This wasn't an all or nothing battle. We repealed parts of a gun control law that's been in place for almost 100 years, longer than people in the comments have even been alive. That is a step in the right direction for future action against the NFA. When commenters say they'd rather have nothing because the registration requirements are still in place, you're saying that GOA should not have worked to repeal some gun control when it was within our power to do so, and could have set us up for success moving forward. We stand firmly by the fact that leaving gun control in federal law when it was 100% possible to remove it would have been the biggest compromise on your rights. We developed and carried out a daring strategy to go for the excise tax and registration to fully repeal the NFA's regulation on suppressors and short-barreled firearms. Congress failed. Congress settled for the backup plan, even while GOA kept pressing for more. Republicans failed to fire or overrule the parliamentarian, and now GOA is continuing the fight to do what Republicans would not do: fully strike down the NFA for suppressors and short-barreled firearms. Secondly, the all-or-nothing argument ignores that. Getting nothing would have been disheartening to the many gun owners who took action. Eliminating the tax now means that more people will buy suppressors and short-barreled firearms, contributing to their being in common use. And now we have a better case for challenging the NFA in court. Our Senior Vice President, Eric Pratt, recently did a video answering questions and explaining why all or nothing was a non-starter. I'll leave the link in the description below if you want to give it a watch. Even still, in the last 72 hours before the bill passed, I can personally say I worked most of those hours, with 24 in one go, fighting to the very end to pass the best possible version of this bill. And while the $0 tax stamp was not what we originally hoped for, it should still be looked at as progress. We're not the only ones saying it's progress.
While this isn't the version we wanted, the way that the Senate worded it actually teed it up for a lawsuit without them even knowing it. Thank you, GOA, for doing what you've been doing. You have been in the fight. Their federal team, who I know very, very well, they've been in the fight in the offices of representatives and senators, getting the work done. Maybe you might hear some rage quitters making some bold videos to try to sway funding and membership, but I know exactly what's going on, and GOA doesn't pay me.
The plan is to remove the $200 tax. If that's removed, what the f is it now, if not a tax? The entire deciding factor of what made the NFA constitutional is now gone. And I guess this is where the fun begins. Also, it just kind of goes to show how stupid the parliamentarian was in ruling that the NFA is not a tax, considering that the Supreme Court of the United States literally made a decision that the hinge pin of which was deciding that the NFA was a tax. Literally the only reason the NFA was allowed to even stay in effect, but me. The fuck do I know? But like said, while this is not a plan A, I am not saying this is a good thing. I'm not saying this is what we should be pushing for. I'm just saying the reality of it is, on the bright side, it does temporarily make NFA items cheaper, while in the long run, giving us a legal roadmap to dismantling the NFA.
No more $200 tax stamp on suppressors and short-barreled rifles. Yeah, you heard that right. So we don't have to cough up that ridiculous $200 tax stamp anymore. Great, right? But let's be real. Am I happy about this? Yes, absolutely. I'll celebrate any win we can get because, let's face it, victories in the fight for the Second Amendment don't come easy. But here's the thing. We shouldn't even be celebrating something as basic as not having to pay a tax on a constitutional right we shouldn't have been taxed for in the first place. We all know the NFA was nonsense from day one, a relic from nearly a century ago. So while this is good news, let's keep our feet on the ground here. The $200 tax stamp was always nothing more than an arbitrary hurdle, punishing law-abiding citizens for wanting shorter rifles and devices that literally protect our hearing. It's absurd we even had to fight for this crumb, and that's exactly why we can't get complacent. Yes, celebrate today. Enjoy the fact that when you buy a suppressor or an SBR, you won't have Uncle Sam shaking you down for an extra $200 on top of the purchase price. That's genuinely awesome. But remember, the ultimate goal is clear: dismantling the NFA entirely. We can't let them think throwing crumbs at us is enough. And this isn't me lecturing you. I'm preaching to the choir here. We all know we've got more battles ahead. There will be lawsuits, there will be advocacy, and there absolutely must be continued pressure on our elected officials, because the fight doesn't end until every unconstitutional gun control law is off the books.
As tempting as it may be to be disappointed and just want to give up, I thought about something recently that helped put it into context and made me more hopeful. Just 3 years ago, 15 Senate Republicans voted for the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the largest piece of gun control legislation in decades. 2 years ago, when Congress voted on pistol braces, it failed in the Senate by 2 votes. Now, 50 Republican senators had no issue voting for a bill that directly attacked the National Firearms Act. This is progress in shifting Congress's Overton window of what is and isn't acceptable. That's a massive change in just a few years' time. Think about what can happen if we keep working to abolish the NFA and all forms of gun control. There's no limit to what we can achieve, and this small victory, although it may not have been everything we wanted, is a demonstration that things are changing and headed in the right direction. The fight isn't over. But now that the reconciliation process is over, we're focused on the next fights, like preventing the ATF and DEA merger and slashing the ATF's budget. Again, gun owners have won a lot lately, like cutting ATF's budget by over $120 million, even though that isn't enough, restoring veterans' gun rights, and legal wins against anti-gun states. Thank you for your continued support and for watching this video. We look forward to continuing to be on the front lines with our awesome members and supporters. And if you want to support our efforts here at GOA, you can become a member at gunowners.org/join. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with GOA's latest fights for your rights.